What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to make a bit of a discussion video covering 5 things that I think DICE really need to try and implement into the game now that we are headed into 2020. Most of you probably already know the enormous turnaround that this game has had in the last 2 years. It went from being one of the most controversial launches of all time for any video game to now 2 years later being absolutely loved by its player base, and sure, there are still a lot of issues, some of which I will actually touch on in this video, but for the most part I think everyone would agree that this game has had a really good turnaround compared to where it was. Now, in my opinion, if the content and live service support for Battlefront 2 ended today, I still do think that this game would be considered a really decent comeback story, as everything they've done from launch until now has mostly been pretty positive. But it does have the potential to end up not only a great comeback story, but also probably one of the best Star Wars games of all time if they are to continue all their hard work on it over the next year, or even more if they do plan on doing that. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that the current state of the game could be considered a pretty decent game, and overall people would look at the game and be pretty happy with how much it's changed. But I do still think that it has the potential to go from being a pretty good game to a really great Star Wars game. And so I pretty much just want to touch on 5 things that I think would put it over the line as a great game rather than a good one. So getting into this list, which is in no particular order, the first thing for me would be the addition of private matches, which is probably one of the most requested additions since launch by a whole lot of people in the community. And I think when it comes to the longevity of multiplayer games, private matches are not only a good addition, but I honestly do think they are a necessity once the game starts getting a little bit older and the player base starts dropping off. Now, from everything we've heard, the player base right now is actually almost as strong as it's ever been, with the launch of the Celebration Edition, Christmas having just passed, and the new Rise of Skywalker trailer and the new content. The game is doing really well right now from everything the devs have told us. In a year from now though, there is no guarantee that we are still going to be getting as much content, and there's no proof as of right now that the player base will be so big in a year's time, and so when that player base does eventually start to fall off again, I think private matches are probably the one thing that kind of can combat that a little bit and add to the longevity of the game. When it gets to the point when it's really hard to find a lobby, having private matches will probably be the only way to actually squad up with friends and play together, just like a lot of people still do in Battlefront 2015, because for the most part, at least on Aussie servers anyway, there are just no regular players in order to find consistent public matches unless you do change to American servers. With that being said though, there are actually a few different communities who regularly play together in private matches for Battlefront 2015, and because of that they can still play with their friends essentially whenever they want, something that wouldn't be possible without the ability to run those private matches. Now, on the other side of it too, there is the ability for YouTubers or just anyone really to host stuff like tournaments or even just fun skirmishes and stuff like that, which is possible at the moment via that kind of workaround where you just use the same ping site. But anyone who has tried that knows that quite often it just doesn't really work, and with private matches that would be an instant fix. For those who don't know, I'm actually one of the project leaders on a project called Battlefront Duels, where that is exactly what we do, hosting tournaments, 1v1s, and just messing around in HVV. And like I said, it can be done without private matches, but it is so much more of a hassle, and it doesn't take all that much for it to be ruined because of multiple different reasons, which can be frustrating to say the least. So for me, private matches are the number one thing that I'd love to see added in 2020. Whether it will happen, I have absolutely no idea, but I do think it really would benefit the future of the game, and also just be a whole lot of fun right now as well. Now, moving on to the next thing on the list, and this one is the addition of original trilogy content in Capital Supremacy. Obviously, when the mode launched, it was just Clone Wars content only, and to be honest, I thought it would stay that way, as there just didn't seem like there'd be any other eras coming, at least not anytime soon. But last month, we did learn that this sequel content is being added to CS later this month. That gave me a fair bit of hope that this could actually happen at some point down the line, so I am definitely pretty optimistic that this will happen, but at the same time there just hasn't really been any signs pointing to this being a possibility, other than the fact that they just have added more than the Clone Wars era content. To me, it definitely seems like DICE wants CS to be their big marquee game mode with how much content they've added to it since its launch, as well as the fact that GA has been pretty much neglected, which is a topic for a different video, but in my opinion, if they want to make CS the main focus of Battlefront 2, then they need to focus on all 3 eras, because otherwise it just does feel as though it's lacking for me, and until that happens, I think I'm always going to prefer playing Galactic Assault. Battlefront 2 was marketed as the game that had playable content across all 3 eras, and sure, they haven't lied about that at all. They've done a really good job of making all eras equally as fun as the rest, but if they have said that it's all 3 eras, then in my opinion they kind of need to add that to CS as well, since it does seem to be their main focus and has been their main focus in terms of game mode since it was added back in March. By adding the OT to Capital Supremacy, we'd not only get 8 more heroes and villains to play in the mode, but probably 3 to 4 new maps and 2 new capital ship interiors as well. So it doesn't sound like all that much, but when you lay it out on the table, it is actually a fair bit of quote unquote new content for the game mode. And honestly, if they did add the OT, then CS may finally become my favourite game mode, because right now I am still a Galactic Assault kind of guy. Now, moving on to the next thing on the list, and that is actually in relation to what I was just talking about, which is more Galactic Assault content.
It's been 84 years
since we got Galactic Assault content, as the last thing we really received was Geonosis way back in November of 2018, roughly 15 months ago at this point, and aside from like reinforcements and stuff, we pretty much haven't received anything else for the game mode. Now, I have no idea of the actual numbers, but from the people that I talk to, most people tend to still prefer Galactic Assault over Capital Supremacy, and so the fact that we haven't really received much content is kind of disappointing, because so many people still love it, and yet it just hasn't really changed at all in over a year now. I do understand that CS is the newer game mode, and that it makes a bit more sense to prioritise content for that, since it is still a pretty decent game mode and it does have a lot of potential, but that shouldn't mean completely shutting out Galactic Assault content for all those players who still play, because unlike some of the other modes that have lacked content, it is still one of the more popular modes in the game. I think if they were to add the new CS maps like Felucia and Agent Colossus into Galactic Assault, that's 2 massive additions that don't really require the workload of a completely new map made from scratch. And I know it still takes a long time and a lot of hard work to transfer the maps over to a different mode, but in my opinion this would just breathe so much life into GA and give the game overall a hell of a lot more variety. Now, the fourth thing on this list is the addition of more weapons for the regular classes, which is a bit of a controversial topic, as this was promised a while back in the launch trailer. And sure, they technically have added new weapons with the new reinforcements, but in my opinion 4 weapons per class is just really not that great at all, and even adding 1 weapon per class is an increase of 20% to the amount of weapons. Regular troopers are what the majority of people are playing at any given time in Battlefront 2, and so the way that I see it, they need to add some more variety to these classes, as they essentially haven't changed at all since launch, other than obviously a few little buffs, nerfs or tweaks here and there. There were an abundance of weapons in Battlefront 2015, not like a crazy amount more, but probably at least double the amount, so I don't actually know why they haven't added any since launch, other than that they've clearly been working on a whole lot of other stuff. But with no more confirmed content really coming in the future, at least not that we know of anyway, I think now would be a great time to add more weapons, or at least start thinking about it at some point throughout 2020. I have heard Dennis say that it's not as easy as it seems, and that the class system actually kind of prevents a lot of possibilities, but I'm almost certain that they can still try and find a workaround for that, as more weapons would probably be one of the more refreshing changes that this game could ever receive. Now, the last thing on the list is a pretty simple one, so I'm not going to touch on it too much as it's pretty self-explanatory, but this one is pretty much just tidying up the game, fixing a lot of the bigger bugs out there like the join bug or the anti-hero rockets as we call them, as well as just some even smaller stuff like the UI changes, menu changes, and overall just anything to do with the quality of life. They're never going to be able to get rid of every single bug, we all know that at this point, but if they can at least get rid of the game breaking bugs like the join bug, then I think that will go such a long way towards improving the quality of this game, as the inability to squad up with friends unless you're all in the menus is pretty damn annoying, and it's just the little things like that which still hold this game back from being a really great game. For all these new players who are coming to the game recently, it must be pretty frustrating to join the game, which is 2 years old at this point, and have some of these issues still showing through the cracks. I can't really imagine that's a great first impression, and if they do still want to market this game, then I think they definitely need to look into fixing some of those smaller bug related issues. At the end of the day, this game has so much potential still left in it, and I really do hope that Disney, EA and DICE all realise that we still want the game to be supported for a while longer, and that if they do put in the work, I honestly think this could go down as a top 3 or 4 Star Wars game of all time. But anyway guys, that is going to do it for this one. Let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything on this list, or if you have any ideas of your own, then make sure to leave them down below as well. If you did enjoy the video guys, then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 videos or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching, you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.